All right, good morning, everybody. This is Kevin Lauren. I'm the Director of Training and Marketing here. And today we're going to be joined by Lauren, who's going to be our go-to transaction coordinator going forward. Very exciting. And so she's going to be talking to us about some of the mistakes that people commonly make with the RPA. So we're going to bring her on in a second. Before I do that, though, we're going to have Cameron Alley join us from Clearview Mortgage. And Cameron's going to give us a little bit of an update on what's happening in mortgage land. Cameron, good morning. How are you today?
Good, Kevin. How are you? Can you hear me, Kevin?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you?
Okay, perfect. Good. Sorry about that. I was just making sure. So, all right, so I'll make this real quick. We definitely got some news today. 10-year Treasury rose 6 basis points today due to the consumer pricing index rising 4.2%. which basically just means higher than expected inflation. That's actually the highest it's been since 2008 for that specific report. So obviously the price of things are increasing, which means the Fed has to increase rates, which means it kind of increases interest rates, but still overall historically very good. And if the one thing too is if rates do go up, I think that'll kind of help the market with a lot less competitive offers. And help more offers be seen, because a lot of people will kind of get priced out of that higher price range. But I think that this is just a momentary thing, because I think rates will go back down. It's just kind of reacting to that report today. And as employment numbers improve, overlays will further lift as well, which is going to make it a lot easier for those self-employed borrowers, because it's really hard for them in the market right now, because they have to provide audited P&Ls and 3 months of business assets, and whereas it used to just be taxes. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. As things get back to normal, rates might go up a little bit, but it's also going to be easier to get loans approved. And then just wanted to touch real quick on help with offers. As far as working with Clearview, getting you quick pre-approvals, like if you need something real quick, like in an hour or two, we can get that over to you. And also something kind of unique that we're able to do very quickly is get you DU findings for specific properties. So let's say you're going to put in an offer for, X property. We can get that exact address, get that property profile, get DU findings for that, and figure out if you can get an appraisal waiver, show them the DTI, show them the available assets. And it's just going to help you have a lot more organized offer and hopefully get that thing approved. So that's pretty much all today for mortgage update. But as always, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me, guys. Perfect,
Cameron. Much appreciated. Yeah, that sounds like a really cool thing for all of our agents to take advantage of. All right, great. Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lauren. Lauren, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
All right. So, and Lauren, pronounce your last name for us.
It's Noack.
Okay, so I would have had it correct, but anyway, to not mess that up.
I appreciate that. Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So Lauren is with Transaction. Her company is the TC Advantage, and maybe you could just tell us a tiny bit about your company, because you will be helping us with a lot of stuff going forward.
Certainly, yeah. I started my company about 10, 11 years ago, and I've been in real estate. I started as an administrative assistant in 2008, so that's sort of trial by fire in that time period of learning the industry, and sort of grew from there and was really drawn to the contracts part of things, and developed a lot of systems and strategies and processes for completing the transaction that really have resonated with agents. And so I've been able to process, on average between 300 and 400 files a year. That was previously on my own. Our team has grown and continues to grow with the demand. And all of our team is trained through me, and all of our processes, they're all licensed. They're not practicing agents, but they are licensed so that we can maintain our education through CAR. And we really see ourselves as a resource for the agent. So I always tell my agents, if there's something that you want to do in a transaction, there's probably a form for it. So reach out to us, ask us, this is what I want to do, and we'll tell you the forms that are needed for it. So that's sort of our approach.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And then also, let me bring Bill Seitz from Clearview Mortgage on. So I know we've the three of us, as well as Tim, we've had a couple of really good conversations. So Bill, welcome. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Lauren. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Yeah, Lauren, so excited to have you on today because I think this is a really big topic and a really important topic for our agents. And as we continually strive to be better agents, we have to be aware of the pitfalls of writing sloppy contracts and making aware of where those things are, right?
Exactly. It was hard to narrow it down to 10, but yeah, it's one of those things that, as a transaction coordinator, we jump into the process once you have an executed contract. And so trying to educate agents on these sort of pitfalls before we get involved can be really beneficial and helpful to everybody. And things are constantly changing all the time as well. So it is hard to keep up on everything.
Well, this is a webinar that I am personally excited to have you walk us through this because I just can't put enough emphasis on this. It not only is it best practices, but it's also going to keep you out of trouble. Hopefully, for writing a poorly written contract or down the line when you're maybe getting into a sticky situation. If you have not done things properly, it could be a detriment to you, the company, and everybody involved, your clients, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, it's something that, as agents, it's become second nature to rely on these CAR forms, but you also have to keep in mind that they're not. It's not an industry requirement. It's an industry standard, and so you can have a transaction, you can have a contract on a napkin, but we're all kind of lucky enough to have access to these forms that have been created with both parties' best interests in mind to be as neutral as possible, and because of that, there are ways to navigate them in your favor on the listing side, and there are ways to navigate them in your favor on the buy side as well. So it's really important to know this specific document, and it's only going to get worse in December with the new 16-page contract that's coming out. So
it's funny.
yeah.
It's funny you mentioned the size of the contract because I was just going through my head as we were talking there. I'm like, well, I think when I started, I think it was 5 pages, and I know I'm not as old as some of the agents we have here, and we have some that are younger, so we have across the spectrum. But I believe it was 5 pages, and it was actually like a you filled it out by hand, and it had like the carbon copy. So
oh yeah, the
you'd write
triplicate.
the triplicate copy. So you'd write the offer, and you'd have hand your client like the yellow color, and then you'd hand
Yep.
the office the back cover, and then you'd keep present the other. So it was pretty archaic now from what we do nowadays, right?
Oh yeah. And as the transaction coordinator, getting those like bottom copies that nobody put protection in between, so you have all the layers written on like the last page. Yeah, I am very grateful for technology and how far we've come. I have a great appreciation for it. But no, I think this new contract, I'm actually really excited about it. I think it's going to be really helpful and really easy to use. It's really intimidating, but I think it's going to be a really good change, and it's just going to be a beast to learn. So if you can grasp these concepts that are already in the contract now, it'll just be a matter of sort of locating where they are in the new contract.
Awesome. Well, we'll let you take it away here. So excited
Great.
to have you on.
Thank you. Yeah.
And
So
Lauren, did you want to share your screen at all, or?
yeah, I could share my screen. I don't know.
Cool. I'll just
There we
stop my screen share. You should be able to share yours now.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if I can figure this out.
All right.
Okay, let's see. Is my screen up here?
No, you may have to click
No.
one more button.
I think I need to undo the permissions here.
Yeah, you should have full permissions now.
Okay.
What do I know?
There we go. Okay. Show the whole desktop.
Perfect.
Great. So I did just want to start initially here on car.org and point out a couple of things that I find are super helpful. Some have started using Glide, and some are still, using accessing the car forms through zip forms. And so this is a familiar screen for a lot of people when you first log in. But I wanted to point out up in the transaction center, and when you go, there are a couple of options that are really helpful up here. One of them in the first tab, the transactions tab, going to the standard forms. This will give you kind of a breakdown of all of the forms that they offer, and if you have a question on kind of what they are, what they do, it's a really helpful resource for that. The other section, oops, is um, in the risk management area. And this is where you can find the legal live webinars. And so this is where they will show you all of the, anytime they go over new releases, car releases new forms in June and December of every year. And so you can see the webinar if you're not able to get a live review. They go over all the things that you need. They also do these regularly. So there's different webinars on, all kinds of different topics. And it's a really helpful resource. Any new laws that come out each year, and that sort of a thing. So you can kind of peruse through there in your own time, and it's a really great spot for viewing that stuff.
No, that's a great resource, Lauren. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And then the other part under the standard forms are the form revisions and the new form releases. And when you click on that, this will give you a whole history of all the revisions of all the forms that they've done, going back very far. And you'll also get a sneak peek on ones that are coming up. So you can kind of get an idea of what's coming down the pipe. This, you can get a whole view on the whole contract that's coming out in December. And you can also see what they're proposing for June, a couple of new forms that are coming out, some changes that they're making to them. And then when you click on it, it will show you the actual form. So you can kind of get an idea of what's coming. And you can also leave your comments. They really welcome comments and feedback. If something you see is like, that's not going to work for us, please let them know. They're really open to that. So yeah, so getting into kind of the bulk of things, once you're in your actual transaction, the other thing I did want to point out was the form, the resources here for car sample letters. These are super helpful for any clients that you have, not even necessarily during the transaction, but these were created by Car Legal getting kind of the same sort of phone calls over and over and over again. And so they all put them together in these sort of really great letters. For example, if your client needs to repair their fence and they need to send something over to their neighbor and they don't know what to say or how to phrase it, Car put together this letter that they can just fill in the blanks and send over to the client.
How awesome is that?
Yeah, there's a ton of different kind of letters. Right now, the biggest one that is typically recommended, a lot of clients, a lot of buyers are in that sort of desperate phase, and they are submitting non-contingent offers. And there's a letter in here for both of them that for both buyer side and seller side, that is acting against broker advice. And so you can, when your client wants to submit that offer that is fully non-contingent, no inspection, no contingent, nothing, it's always a good idea to kind of put this together to the client and go, we think this is a really bad idea, but here you go.
Sign it away.
Exactly. Like, this is just confirming that we told you. There's other things of,
Love
if
it.
you have a really difficult client, there's a letter in there that's confirming a conversation that you had, and you just write it down and send it over and they sign it while everybody's still happy, and then you have it for the file. So it's a really great resource that's there in car forms. So jumping in for the purchase agreement, I'll just kind of go through sort of page by page a lot of the things that I see that are really common mistakes that agents make, not necessarily on purpose, and some are fairly common sense, but as you're going through, it can be really easy to make. So uh, one of the other things that I usually recommend for my agents is going into your settings in car forms and adjusting. You can adjust the color of these fields. And I always recommend to make it really bright because as you kind of get in the weeds in these forms, it's really hard to see where there's a fillable field. And so if you go into your settings, you could kind of poke around in there and you can adjust that. So I highly recommend that. But the first thing that I will say that is a common thing that I see actually involves the closing date. And agents sometimes will put in a specific date and for whatever reason, don't check the calendar when they pick that date. And it will end up being on a weekend or it will end up being on a holiday. And so it's something that is really easy and yet still really common that I see as a lot of agents aren't very specific. And just to keep in mind too, that the closing date occurs on days after acceptance. And this is days with a capital D. And it's important because towards the end of the contract, when you get into the definitions, the word days with a capital D is actually specified. And so this comes into play when you're talking about contingency removal dates. The client, buyer or seller cannot be compelled to perform on a weekend or a legal holiday, and instead it goes to the next day. I see a lot of kind of escrow companies and a lot of agents always assume, oh, if it lands on a Saturday, we'll do it on a Friday. Or if it lands on a Sunday, then we do it on a Monday. No, it's the next day. And it's really specified and defined in the contract. So keep that in mind when you're thinking of dates, when you're thinking of time frames, and how to handle all of those. Another thing that I see is with the deposit. The default in the contract is already delivering the deposit by electronic funds, but I see a lot of agents check the box and say other and write in wire. It's not necessary. It's not necessarily a mistake, but when you and you'll see a sort of common thread in all of these items. Anytime you reiterate terms that are already in the contract, it can cause ambiguity. And that is where a lot of the legal issues arise, is somebody doesn't interpret something the same way that another person does. And so you want to be as clear and precise as possible. So just note what is already written into the contract. So the default is that it's already by electronic funds. The other thing that I see a lot is people will fill out the terms for the first loan and then that's it. And they don't include any of the other loan information. And these terms are really important. They actually are a part of what is required to form a binding agreement. They're part of the statute of frauds. And it's something that even if as a listing agent, when you receive the contract and you see those terms aren't written in, counter them out. Put the buyer in a box that they need to perform in. And that way, when you have those specific terms, there is something that a standard that you can hold the client to for performance. And then you can issue a notice to perform if they aren't doing it. And these little terms are really vital in a market like this, where there's a lot of turnover and there's a lot of demand. So details matter, and it's really important to make sure that those specifics are in there.
Lauren, let me interrupt you really quick.
Yeah.
On that section, D1 and 2, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that we have a buyer that's you putting in the FHA financing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the loan has to be restructured or something changes to where the buyer can go conventional. Which is usually a positive thing, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
going conventional back to FHA. But
right.
when those changes arise,
Mm-hmm.
what is your opinion of best practices in order to, because I think this is an area where this happens a lot, and I know
Mm-hmm.
it does, that
Yep.
when the changes to the financing occur, what kind of disclosure to the other party, seller and seller's agent, listing agent in this case, right?
Mhm.
Are we mandated to make when those changes of financing are going to occur?
So a couple of things. One thing that I see a lot are people making offers that are conventional and then going to FHA. I think that that's probably more of what I see than the other way around. But either way, you have to get the seller's approval, and you have to update the contract. The buyer and seller have agreed to purchase this property under these terms. There is a section in the contract down here in 3K that's buyer stated financing. Oops. And so the seller has agreed to these specifics, and the buyer is represented that they are going to do this purchase with these financing specifics. If the buyer wants to change, they can. They have to, get that agreement or do an amendment, essentially, not an addendum to the contract. That's when you're adding terms. You want to use the AEA form, which is the amendment of existing agreement, when you're changing terms that have already been agreed upon in the contract. And then the contract says in here that the seller has no obligation to cooperate with the buyer's efforts. So if
that was my next question. If they do try to make this change and present it, the seller gets an out.
Absolutely. Same thing if you go, you make an all cash offer and then you switch to a loan. You can absolutely do that. That's no problem. You can get an agreement to change those terms. But if your lender needs an appraisal, the seller doesn't have to let the lender in or the appraiser in. The seller doesn't have to do any of that stuff. And the buyer is still required to perform according to the timeframes that were originally agreed upon. So, if they make that change and then they say, well, we got to get a second appraisal, so we have to kick out this time frame, the seller can issue a notice to perform and move on and cancel if they so choose. So
this is such
really
a big
important.
one. Yeah, this is like I think this is probably one of the most common things that are possible friction points in the transaction. And I don't think they had this section of Section K many years ago. And I think for that reason, they put that in there because I certainly remember when I was running around selling properties, it was like, people would be flipping all sorts of different financing scenarios. And it wasn't done in this manner where the seller was getting full disclosure and kind of losing control of their leverage in the transaction.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially a bait and switch. And it's something that, it's hard as the agent to, I see a lot of, here's when we submit this offer, it's with these terms and we have this pre-approval letter or this pre-qual letter. And then, I've had the experience of 2-3 weeks into the transaction, you email the lender and they're like, we're not doing this file. And the buyer has gone and changed lenders. Those sort of things, they can make those changes, but they are in an agreement. This is a binding agreement between buyer and seller to operate under these terms. So it's so important that your buyer is clear on what they're going to do when they're making this offer, instead of this, just make the offer and submit it, and then we'll figure it all out after acceptance. It's a really dangerous game to play, and it's really important that you inform your client of these sort of things that are built into the contract.
No, 100%. And let me ask you one more question, because let's assume that Mr. Listing agent took, and the seller, the buyer presents the offer with the the pre-approval, the financing, and all the stuff, and let's say the contract's filled out correctly under whatever financing they're going to do, and then they do want to switch companies. So maybe they're not switching loans, but they're switching companies. Is it implied that the pre-approval that you're submitting with that offer is in fact who you're going with? Or if the buyer can get a better rate or better terms and conditions for them, and they switch companies, but they're not switching financing terms, right?
Right.
What's your thought on that?
So there is the section when talking about the loan applications, and the buyer is required to either submit with the offer, which is common practice, the pre-approval letter, um, uh, and submit that with those terms on the letter with the offer. And so if they want to go somewhere else, basically this section should act as kind of a cap, because if then the buyer, the buyer could go change lenders, and one, they still need to stick with the same timeframes, right? So if they change lenders halfway through the transaction, and you only have 3 days left to remove your appraisal contingency, good luck to you, because you're still obligated to perform in those same timeframes, even if you've changed up the lender. But now if the other lender has come back and said, okay, well, we can get you approved, but your rate is going to be much higher. It's going to say you put in, just for numbers sake, 5%, but they come back and say 10% or something. The buyer could cancel because they've agreed, to specific terms. They've set that limit. And so if there isn't that limit there, essentially the seller could say, no, you have to go with this loan because there was no exceeding cap. There was, so they're saying they can approve you. You can't cancel based on loan approval. You have to go through with this loan because even if it's at 10%, sorry. And so it's really important to put those terms in there, one, to protect yourself, and two, to protect the seller, or the buyer or the seller in that case. So as far as changing the company, that it's not necessarily who is doing it on the pre-qualification letter, it's what the terms are that are being proposed.
Yeah. And I guess now I think through it, it's probably pretty rare since the timelines are in place. I mean, the purchase side of it's pretty, you got what, 17 days, 14 days, 21 days, whatever you've got in the contingent periods for the loan. There's not really much room to start flipping around, but I know it does happen, but that's really good advice on making sure you fill out that portion accurately and knowing, you gotta have your head in this thing and know exactly what you're putting down there to protect both sides.
Exactly. Because this is your out. This is, when clients cancel, or when buyers are like, I'm just going to cancel this transaction, I changed my mind. You really have to have specific reasons for canceling. And the reasons for canceling are written into the contract. And so if you're saying, well, I can't, this loan rate is too high, I don't want it, I'm going to cancel based on the loan contingency. That's not part of the loan contingency. That's not the deal. So it's really important that that you can't just pick from the list of cancellation reasons and pick whichever one fits best. You really have to have a legitimate reason for cancellation. And otherwise you're looking at, the liquidated damages and all of that fun legal stuff. So it's something that is super common. I see it blank all the time and it drives me bonkers. The other thing too to note is checking the all cash offer and checking that box. It's already written in here that it's not contingent on buyer obtaining a loan. So you don't have to counter that there's no loan contingency. You don't have to go back and check the box that there's no loan contingency. It's already written into there. So again, the less redundant you can be, the less you rewrite what's already in the contract, the better off you are, because these contracts have been litigated to death. And so the wording is very specific. So having said that, the other thing that I see that is really common is talking about home warranty coverage. And that drives me nuts too. This will change in the new contract, but until December, this section is not a blank check. One, it's really important to remember. The actual verbiage is that you are putting in a cost for a home warranty not to exceed a certain amount of money with the following optional coverages. So when you say we want a seller is going to pay for a home warranty for $900 and then with this service provider, and then that's it, you're going to get a standard 1-year home warranty plan, and there are no optional coverages that are written in. And so it's important to, again, it says in here right after that, investigate these coverages, determine what's best for you. Your best choice is probably to say other and then just buyer's choice of coverage, which that's how the new contract will be written, is that it's buyer's choice for all of this stuff. And you basically just determine who pays for it and how much, and then buyer picks everything else. The other thing that I see is that agents will go in and check every box, all of this stuff. And then down here, they've included the fridge and the washer dryer in the purchase, and then they don't include any coverage in the home warranty. So, and just checking the upgraded box, a lot of the home warranty companies now have like 3 different levels. The other thing to think of is if it's a Crest home warranty, that's a higher cost, that's different coverage. There are things that I see all the time when you're talking about additional refrigerators, not just a fridge in the garage. This is like a wine fridge. Things that I've seen, they had a seller or a buyer had refrigerator coverage, but the wine fridge in the living room leaked and spilled water and ruined all of the flooring, but it wasn't covered because there wasn't additional refrigerator coverage. So those sort of things in the home warranty are really important, and it's important to have a good home warranty rep that you trust, that you can say, here's the property, what do I need, what do I put in here. And when you're on the listing side and you see sort of a high number, sometimes buyer's agents will be like $1,000, and then the listing agent will counter back and be like $500. You also, the home warranty really protects the seller also, and it provides an opportunity for certain things that maybe the seller wasn't aware of to just get remedied on the buyer's own time, instead of the buyer having to go through agents and trying to get in contact with the seller to figure out all of these details. So it's not something to be stingy on. I think it's something that's really important in transactions. And after the file has closed, we get most of our contact from clients comes from, can you send me this home warranty invoice, 6 months, 9 months after a transaction's closed. So those details are really important.
And Lauren, to that point, I think it's important for everyone to share with their clients how big a role the home warranty plays in. It's just that extra little layer of protection and security, knowing that something happens in that first year, at least in the first year, that you have something in place that, stuff goes sideways with one of the, appliances or a leak or, it's that you have something in place that you're not going to get blown up. Why didn't you protect me? How come, you know what I mean? And you have angry clients, and, it's just preventative.
That stuff happens all the time, it really does.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, again, if you're, let's say the seller leaves the fridge for you, that warranty for the fridge is not going to transfer over to the new buyer. And the buyer is not really going to know, all the ins and outs of that fridge, and say it breaks, 3 months into living there. I know from my own personal experience, our seller left the fridge and we moved in and we were like, oh my gosh, the ice maker is broken. Like it's not making ice. What's going on? Well, it turns out there wasn't a water line to the fridge. And so it never was making ice. And it wasn't that the fridge was broken. It was that it wasn't plugged into anything. So, we had tried to get it, replaced through the home warranty company. And it was, it's this whole thing. You just never know what you're getting from the seller when certain things are getting transferred over. So protect yourself. And home warranty companies have all kinds of stuff. If there's an outdoor kitchen, they do rekeying when you move in. They do, all kinds of bells and whistles. So it's something that's really great that you can, go back to your clients with and remind them of, hey, don't forget, you have a home warranty, summer's coming, get your AC serviced. Here's a copy of your home warranty plan. It'll be $75 for your, the tech to come out and get that all up and running. Same thing with the furnace, during winter. So
No,
it's
I
a
love
really
that, Lauren. We talk
important
a
thing.
lot on these webinars about, client retention and getting
Mhm.
referrals and staying in touch and top of mind with your past clients. And those are just, no brainers.
Yeah, yeah,
Everybody, it should
exactly.
be on the little tickler file of like what I do with a client,
Mhm.
so great point. Love that.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, a seller won't include a home warranty or something like that. I would still encourage the buyer to purchase one, or maybe you purchase one for your buyer. But just because, if the box is checked here that the buyer waives the home warranty, I still always ask, are they gonna purchase one on their own, or maybe they'll purchase it after closing or something like that. But it's something that's really important. These are really big investments for people, and it's important to have them covered. So something to think about, definitely. The other thing that I see in here that drives me bonkers, that is a really common mistake, has to do with possession after closing. Um, when the seller remains in possession, as we're seeing a ton right now, um, it's important to know that the SIP form, the seller in possession form, that's the one-page seller in possession, this is for less than 30 days. So 29 days or less. If you say seller to remain in possession for 30 days after closing, you need to do the residential lease after sale, the RLAS, because by law, 30 days or more, now you're creating a tenancy. And so those protections, those terms, those all come into play on day 30. So it's really important that you have the right form, that you have the right expectation as well. You are letting your client know, hey, day 30, you're a landlord and they're a tenant. And if they decide they don't want to leave, that's a whole other ball game. And it's something that is really important to consider when you're letting your clients stay,
That
or
is a
letting
that
the
is a
seller stay.
massive potential pitfall liability right there. I mean, that is a
Hmm.
massive one.
Yep, exactly. So, a lot of agents are like, oh, it's like this 5-page document with all these other bed bug things and, these forms and stuff. And like, it's just 30 days. We'll throw it on the SIP form. And, we'll kick it back because that's not helping anybody. And so it's important to consider those timeframes. What else? The other thing I see a lot of right now, especially, has to do with the inspection contingency timeframes. So buyers are like, we will, remove our inspection contingency in 5 days. Okay, great. Then they don't remove this section up here on how long the seller has to get you all of this stuff, not just the disclosures, to get you any sort of reports, to get you the preliminary title report, to get you all of this stuff. So I see a lot really common 7-day inspection contingency removal. Well, then that means on day 7, the seller would deliver that to you. The other thing to keep in mind then is that the buyer has 5 days after, 5 days after delivery to review those items that the seller's provided. So the buyer might have a 7-day contingency. And if you deliver all of this stuff on day 7, the buyer now has an additional 5 days to remove that contingency, to review all of this stuff and remove it. So you can't give them all of this stuff on day 7 and then a notice to perform, because that's invalid. So these timeframes are correlated. They one come after the other, and it's really important to know what that expectation is. You might have all of these things set up as a listing. I wouldn't go any less than 5 days for a buyer inspection contingency. They can waive their home inspection, but they still have a required amount of time to review all of these other details, and upon review can cancel at any time. So
And that's a really good
the
point,
other
Lauren. And I think to that, it's so important to have everything done on the front end, because
Mhm.
you start doing this stuff, some of these things after you've opened escrow, or after you put in the MLS, if
Yeah.
you're not prepared to deliver these reports to the buyers, they get those free days, like Lauren said. So you might think you have this little short window, and then you forgot to give something to the buyer. Well, guess what? You just extended that 5 days.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, the most common thing that that agents don't realize is they're avid. They're avid. The agent visual inspection is an addendum to the TDS. And that transfer disclosure statement is part of the statutory disclosure requirement. They have to provide that to the buyer within whatever time frame is set up here. And your avid is an addendum. And I cannot tell you how many times listing agents were like, oh, I'll do my avid at the home inspection, or I'll do my avid. Okay, fine. But after your avid comes in, the buyer can cancel. They don't even need to cite anything specific, but you delivering your avid after that time frame gives them an additional 5 days to review or cancel. And if they are looking for a way out, your avid can provide that for them, because they don't have to offer any kind of reason. They can just cancel based on that disclosure. So it's important to have all of this stuff put together. One of the other things that is included in here are the HOA documents also, and the prelim. So things that sometimes have a longer turnaround time. And you have to be aware of that. Any kind of lease, if you have a solar lease and you need to get a copy of that lease from the solar company and send that to the buyer, maybe that could take a little bit longer. All of these things. So as a listing agent, know what's in here, know what you need to put together, know what you need to get from your client to make sure that they provide it in a timely manner, so that these are realistic timeframes. Because once you start, extending out these dates, or like, oh, we need a couple extra days. Oh, okay, I'll give you a couple extra days. And then, but you don't get an extension for that contingency, then everything starts getting really gray, and it's really hard to hold parties accountable to the terms that they agreed to in the contract. So just think of these items moving forward. It's really important.
Yeah, and Lauren, real quick, we have a couple little comments in the chat. So one question is, what happens when you check the box for a pool to be covered, but then the pool needs repair but was not covered in the warranty?
So that there is no pool or spa coverage at all.
Yeah, I think
the thing to consider, the pool and spa coverage is really specific with home warranties too. So that's something that to keep in mind, that it's not like all of the pool and all of the spa. It's like this specific feature in the pool, and like we won't fix the pool light. It's only everything like above ground, right? So it's like the pool equipment, but like if you have an issue with your pool light, it's not going to cover that because that's below ground technically. And so, again, have a home warranty rep that you trust and that you work with, and educate your clients as well, and give them, again, I would write in, these are buyer's choice for the coverage. Here are the pamphlets. Here's all the information. Here are the phone numbers for these 3 reps from these 3 companies. Call them and ask them. Say, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they'll tell you. Yeah.
Perfect. And then Charles, of course, says the home warranty company is not going to cover something that was already broken, right?
That is true. They do ask you when you place the order that you are testifying that everything is in working operating order. So that's another thing that I also highly recommend is when you have a listing, is get seller's home warranty coverage. Because if you have that seller coverage and then something comes back in the home inspection, you could just use the home warranty to cover it, especially if your property is vacant, because who knows what's going on in that property when nobody's there. So seller home warranties are a great feature as well, that I recommend. So
for sure. And then Catherine Perosi says, can we have Catherine come back for a question and answer session? So, absolutely, but even better than that, you can for sure, get in contact with Lauren, and Lauren should be your TC going forward. And so, utilize her services. She is here, for that reason. So, but very, very cool, of course.
Yeah. So
Well, I
just a
think
couple
too,
other things.
sorry,
Go
one
ahead.
last thing to that. I just think too that as our agents get to know you more,
Mhm.
Lauren, they're going to see the value in, obviously, you know what you're talking about. And you've raised so many good points today that I think that, whether we can cover everything today, you'll keep going for a few more minutes for sure, but we can always do, a follow-up on this. But I
Definitely.
think that we want to make sure that our agents know how to reach you and stuff in the, when we're done here, because I
Sure.
think they're already realizing how valuable this information is. And for all of us, I mean,
Good.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah,
David
definitely.
also just says, as an agent, do I have to make sure that the heater's working? Assume 1 month later the heater's not working, my buyer said and didn't want to buy a home warranty. Is the heat liable? Absolutely not.
No. You are not a professional. That also talks, brings up when you're doing your agent visual inspection, why it's so important to fill those things out, in full and correctly too, because things that come up a couple of months later where you can look back and, and say, you are not a professional inspector. Those are not things that you're supposed to be covering. With your agent visual, you're not supposed to climb up on the roof and see if there's any issues on the roof.
Right.
And so it's kind of that same thing. It's a visual inspection, things you can visually see. And if your client is like, hey, I've been having issues with the water heater, but don't tell anybody, then yeah, that's an issue. Like that's something that that does fall back on you. But if you're not aware, then you're not aware. So yeah, it's just best to get those things covered. So
Exactly.
and the other thing too I'll say on that is pay attention. Again, be in good communication with your reps, because I know at the beginning of this year and just a couple weeks ago for First American, they changed their pricing. So a lot of agents have the terms and the prices like in a template, and then they'll end up being like $10 short because they were like, oh, we want this coverage for this price, and they were really specific and didn't realize that the home warranty cost changed. So then it's like, okay, who's responsible for the extra $10? And then it always ends up coming out of the agent's
I
commission
was
because
say,
they're like, I'll just cover the $10.
that always comes
Yeah,
out of the agent's pocket.
exactly. So it's important to again know what you're putting into this contract on behalf of your client, because this binds the buyer and seller. This is an agreement between the two of them, and you are facilitating those terms for them. And so it's really important to know what's in here and how to utilize it and to protect your client.
Yeah, and so I think what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, hopefully having Lauren come back about once a month, based on some feedback that we've gathered from our agents. Marketing training is awesome, but training on these contracts and this is a really big area, and an area of need for our agents. So we'll definitely be doing this more often.
Good. Well, I'm happy to come back. I am CAR certified as a transaction coordinator and as a forms trainer. So these forms are my wheelhouse, and I love diving into them. So I'm happy to come in and talk on them as much as possible. So
yeah, what a great resource.
And how do our agents connect with you, Lauren, if they want you to TC their file, they want to utilize your services? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so our website is thetcadvantage.com, and you could find a lot of information on there of our services, our pricing. And then when you would like to move forward from there, I will schedule like a 20-minute sort of discovery call with you. And for me, setting expectations is paramount. And so I want to have that open dialogue of what you are expecting out of a transaction coordinator and what we provide in our transaction coordinator services. And so we have that conversation. And then for the onboarding process, I send over a link to fill out online with any of your agent details and contact info and login information, and then an expectations and services agreement. And then moving forward to open transactions, we just have online intake forms for new listings and new escrows that you can submit to us, or you would submit to your dedicated transaction coordinator. So yeah, I'm happy to. My contact information is also on the website.
Can
My
we
phone
maybe
number and my email as well.
can we maybe pull up that your homepage just so
Yeah.
we can visually see it?
Yeah. Let's see.
And then of course, I'll send out, when I send out the replay, guys, I'll of course have all of Lauren's contact information as well.
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool.
There's our
Awesome.
website. And
We'll be
you just go
updating
to
our website too, to include her information on our website. So I'll try to make it super easy for you guys to get a hold of Lauren.
yeah. So there's a phone number, email. This is our TC team as well. And so all of that information is on the website under About Us and Meet the Team. There's also information for getting started if you're interested. These are the steps I just talked about, what that process looks like. And then when you're ready, you have your new intake forms for new listings and new escrows. You can just submit them directly on our website and go from there.
Easy to
Awesome.
do.
Can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a good go-to TC that you can rely on for advice, for keeping you in line with your transactions, that can mitigate disasters, liability, that you can have a chat with and say, hey, what do you think about this? Not just someone who uploads documents, but actually has real valuable input. And the fact that Lauren is a CAR certified form advisor, it doesn't take a high IQ to realize that she's very valuable.
Thank you.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
we definitely like to be that resource for the agents, and their transaction coordinator is a really broad term, and we try and kind of refine it for the services that we provide to be a resource for the agent and really provide that sort of risk management and compliance approach for these things, because it's a big deal. It's a big purchase and life changing for a lot of people, and you guys change the lives of a lot of people on a daily basis. So we want to make sure that you're protected.
A lot of responsibility,
Definitely, yeah. And it's something that we see as TCs all the time. I'm just like, how did they get their license? This is crazy. Like, this
I know.
it's we see all kinds of stuff. And so it's, you never know when you get one of those agents on the other side. You never want to be that agent, but you also don't know, in the lottery who you pull on the other side of a transaction. So if they submit you kind of a garbage offer, knowing what's in there and how to counter it out and how to approach those terms is really important.
Yeah, can't say that enough. Well,
Yep.
Lauren, we really appreciate you coming on the webinar. Looking forward to having you on more of our webinars. And also, I know a lot of our agents are already working with you, but looking forward to having more of our agents working with you, because it also helps us streamline our business and make sure that we're not chasing stuff. And so
Yeah.
appreciate it there.
Well, good. It was my pleasure, and I'm here to answer any questions or anything like that. So I look forward to working with you all.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much, agents, for coming on the webinar, and we look forward to seeing all of you next week on Wednesday. So get out there and make it a great week, a productive week, and we'll see you next week on the webinar. Bye-bye.